But first, I want to introduce Janie Gonzales. She's the CEO at Webhead. If she could come up and join us. Where'd she go? There she is. We also have Fatima Lopez, who joins me from Howard Energy. She is Mexico Counsel and Business Development Professional for us. And so she's getting mic'd up, I believe, but she'll be joining us in just a second. And then we also have Ms. Hannah Zunker. She is the Manager of Trading at Diamond Green Diesel. So she's joining us today as well. All right, so each of you ladies have a mic, so if you want to get comfortable, turn on your mics. We'll just go in order and let you tell us a little bit about yourselves before we start.
Well, good afternoon. First of all, before I start, I want to thank the individuals who served us and prepared the food, so thank you so much. We often take them for granted, so thank you. And then just for that lovely song, so again, thank you. And I want to thank Jerry, who was wonderful in coordinating, but I'm a hot mess and had a really hard time responding to all those emails. But again, good afternoon. My name is Janie Martinez Gonzales, and I am the CEO of Webhead. But I also have another role, and I just stepped down as chairwoman of CPS Energy. So if you're wondering what the connection is. And so we were asked very specific questions, and one of them was, how did I start my career? Well, it started in tech. I started one of the original tech startups here in San Antonio in 1994 when I was a junior at UTSA. I said, oh my God, I think the internet's going to change the way we live, work, and play. And so I started a web development and hosting company in 1994. So I've literally have grown with the internet. And so, and I'm also known as, my other journey is I transitioned from not just being a tech leader, but I transitioned into civic leadership. And that really came through having an advocate because there were no women in tech. There was not a lot of support for starting your own venture. And so that led to advocacy. That advocacy then led to many boards and commissions that I've served on. But today, by choice, I only serve at CPS Energy because it is a big endeavor and a responsibility, and I don't really have a lot of bandwidth for anything outside of that. And so what has driven, what's been my compass to my career journey, and it's really simple. When I was a little girl to the current woman I am today, it's really been about passion for advocacy, equity. And when I mean equity, I'm not talking about everything has to be equal. I'm talking about equity, mobility, having generational wealth. And it's innovation, and it's been about modernizing infrastructure, whether it's people, whether it's physical infrastructure. It really has been those things that have been really key to my journey. And then the other thing has been really just 30 years of experience in technology and leadership across the Department of Defense, state agencies, and utilities. And so what you will learn, depending where you are in your journey, that a lot of your natural gifts and a lot of the skills that you'll pick up in your career will lead you to where you want to be, but something has to be more than just technical skills. It's a vision, it's lived experiences, and frankly, it's not settling for where you started and where you are today. It's a constant evolution of taking what you hone and just continue to improve it. In our industry in tech, we call it agile sprints. Every 2 to 3 weeks, we add a function or a feature. And in many ways, that's how your career has to be. You have a core foundation, but that constant every 2 to 3 weeks kind of improving and refining who you are has to take place in the life cycle of your life. So I believe that was the initial first question I've answered.
Yes, thank you. Hi everybody, my name is Hannah Zunker, and as Jerry shared, I work for Diamond Green Diesel, and if anybody is not familiar with Diamond Green Diesel in this room, I know the Howard folks are, I see a lot of Valero people in here too. We're a 50-50 joint venture, 50% owned by Valero. So I'm a Valero employee, but I work specifically on the joint venture, so it's renewable fuels. I'll share a little bit about my career journey and maybe along the way, what some lessons learned, right? How I got where I am today. So my undergraduate degree is in chemistry. And I worked in a laboratory for about a year, and I hated it. I was like, I'm far too social for this. I cannot be a lab rat. And so it was fun. I learned a lot, but I knew right away it was just not meant for me. And so I leaned on a chemistry professor of mine that I really trusted and saw as a mentor, and he recommended that I kind of go the business route, more commercial route, and I consider getting my MBA. And so I did something that was a little bit uncommon. I went straight from undergraduate into an MBA graduate program, which is, normally you go get a little career experience, but I did it because I needed to buy time because I didn't know what the heck I was going to do with my life. And I had a lot of friends who had jobs lined up, and I just wasn't there. I didn't know what to do. I had originally thought I was going to go to dental school, and I nearly fainted every time I shadowed a dentist. It grossed me out, and so really struggled there too. So anyway, I eventually went and got my MBA, and I really loved the business courses. It was just really fun for me, and it kind of exposed me to this other world that I didn't really know a lot about. And I was at UTSA for my grad program, and you have to get an internship in your MBA program. And I thought, well, who cares about a chemistry degree and an MBA? And I thought, well, maybe the energy industry does, right? That seems very applicable. And so I went to a STEM career fair, and I interviewed with multiple tables, and Valero offered me an internship. And I thought, well, gosh, that's convenient. That's next door, right? And so that was my logic there. And I started interning, and I had the absolute worst job ever. I answered customer complaint phone calls. When the retail spinoff was happening, and so I answered complaints about ices being melted and things like that. So that was not a great job, but I picked up on the fact that I loved the Valero culture. I was like, this is a cool business. I think this is a place I'd like to stay. I'd like to learn more about this industry. And so I kind of set my sights on finding a role within the company. And so I voiced that to people I was working with, like, hey, this customer service thing doesn't really seem like a good fit, but I like this company and I'd like to find an opportunity here. And so just voiced what I was interested in, and eventually some opportunities came up, and the San Antonio Pipeline Association will appreciate this. I was part of Valero's measurement assurance team for about 3.5 years, where I did technical audits of critical measurement points along our wherever key custody transfer points were. So I got to go to all of Valero's sites. I got to go to third-party terminals. I got to meet a lot of people, and so I was this young girl out in the field who really didn't know what she was doing, that was trying to fix problems and make and fix things and tell people how to do them. And so that was a bit of we're going to talk about challenges, I think, at some point today. And that was an interesting challenge, a lot that I learned there, but it was a really fun role, and I got to work with a lot of different teams. And the next thing I had my sights on was business development. I thought, well, that is cool. I really can apply my MBA knowledge there, and I want to join some sort of business development team. And at that time, Valero was investing heavily into the midstream space, and so a lot of the business development work was definitely in midstream, and I happened to be in the midstream group. And so again, I voiced it, hey, I really like this kind of work. And at the time, the CEO, Joe Gorder, was looking for ways to be more active in the policy space, shaping policy, not responding to policy, but being a little more proactive in that space. And so they created a team called the Strategic Planning and Public Policy Team. And they needed people, and they needed someone to do the work, do the analysis. And I had voiced, hey, I'm really interested in this space. So somebody said, hey, I heard you're interested. They're interviewing. And so I interviewed, and I got the job. And so I worked mostly on low carbon fuel projects in that role. It was Valero evaluating whether low carbon projects made sense, which ones did, which ones didn't, which ultimately led me to Diamond Green Diesel, which is Valero's renewable diesel and sustainable aviation fuel business. So I knew about this much about renewable fuel, which kind of made me an expert at that time. And so then I got pushed into the renewable fuel space, which I really love. And again, I think the big thing in my career progression was just kind of voicing what I was interested in to people. So that way, when opportunities did come up, I found out about them. And then I tried to seize them when they came. So a little bit about career progression. And then today, I handle Diamond Green Diesel's finished product trading. So all of the product that comes out of our plants, we've got renewable diesel, sustainable aviation fuel, renewable LPGs. So I find homes for all of those products. And a lot of the renewable space has a lot to do with compliance. And our compliance folks are sitting here. My legal representation is here. So I'll plead the fifth if I need to. But okay. That's my career journey.
Well, thank you. That's really insightful. I was just talking to Casey, that's here from Howard Energy Partners, and I told her that I met with you a couple of weeks ago or maybe a month ago on a Zoom meeting, and I told her I didn't know her, but she looks like a fantastic woman. And yeah, being here with you today, sharing this space, yeah, you could be like my longtime friend. Well, thank you everyone for having us today. Thanks to Michael and Jerry for organizing this. Thank you for my fellows at the panel. My name is Fatima Lopez. I'm from Mexico City. I moved to the US 2 years ago to join Howard Energy Partners. Currently, I'm head of legal and commercial operations for Mexico. My background is a little bit more different. So I grew up in Mexico. I went to law school. Law school in Mexico, it's quite different from the US. So in Mexico, you go to law school right after high school. So you are an 18-year-old girl who knows nothing about life, knows nothing about politics, and you gotta make a big change decision, like what's gonna be my career? So when I was in high school, my mentors told me, well, you are good with words, you like to be proactive, you like to advocate for people. And I told them, yeah, I want to be someday part of the UN. I want to go work for the Security Council. I want to represent one of the big countries in the world and make the difference. And they were like, yeah, that's a little bit complicated. You need to focus on something that it's immediate. And I was like, okay, well, international law, that sounded interesting. And they were like, okay, then you should study law. And that's why I started to study law. I went to law school. And I hated it at the beginning, to be honest. And I talk nowadays with all my colleagues and my friends from law school, and I would say like 50% are lawyers still and working, and the others, they just shift their careers. They hated it, they don't like it. And that was for me at the beginning. I didn't like it. And the options that they were presenting to me was like, oh, you could be litigating a court, or you could be corporate lawyer, like merchant acquisitions. And I was like, that still sounds really boring, to be honest. Um, and then I went on studying law, like just going to school. And it's common in Mexico that when you're studying, you need to start working. Otherwise, you don't get good job opportunities. So the time had come and I was struggling trying to find a job and going to plenty of interviews to these big law firms, White and Case, Baker and McKenzie, and all these corporate, huge international law firms. And they all ask for experience. And I was just there sitting, telling them, well, I'm a 20-year-old that's studying law. Of course, I don't have experience, but if you give me the opportunity, I'll have experience. I learn fast, I study hard, and I'm really interested in being part of this corporate world. So a friend of mine told me, hey, we have an opening at my firm. It's a boutique firm on the energy field. And I was energy field, like, what's that? Like energy law? What's okay? Well, I'll do it. So I went, I interviewed, and I worked there for 2 years. It was more on the corporate side, like contracts for energy corporations. I worked with Abengoa, which is no longer in the market. I worked for Iberdrola, which is a Spanish company, and I was an outside counselor for them. And then I shifted to the dark side. So I went to work to the judicial power for 2 years of criminal law. I was there for 2 years, and definitely that's you need a tough skin for that. I was there 2 years and decided that that was not gonna be what I needed, that I was falling in love with energy law. But I had to do something else to grow in my career and have more tools. And I went to China. So I went to do my studies in China, to continue law school there to learn Mandarin. And I was there living for about 8 months. I learned Mandarin. It's not as strong these days. I know how to say thank you, bye bye, and stuff like that. I forgot all of it. I was better at that time, definitely. And I'm more funny in Spanish. So I went back to Mexico after 8 months in China. I had one last semester of law school. And then another friend of mine was like, hey, so what are you going to do with your life? And I was like, well, I need to find a job again. So I interviewed for another law firm, and this law firm was my house, my home, and my life for 8 years. It's RDA, which is Rodriguez Dávalos Abogados. I was a law clerk there for my last semester of law school, and then I grew in that law firm, and that law firm is specialized in the energy field, which gave me all the tools that I have today to be head of legal and commercial operations at Howard. I'm also commercial operations, and that's doing business development, which I'm really good with words and talking to people, but it's a whole new world. And well, you should know more about that, Hannah. Like, it's a whole new world. It's a lot of negotiating, yeah. It's a lot of socializing. And then some days my social battery is like -10, but I'm still out there. Well, this is my career path, and thank you for listening.
Wonderful stories, ladies. I love to hear the diversity in your career paths and your journeys and how you have built your success from basically experimenting and exploring and being open, namely being flexible and agile in the space and trying new things. That's fantastic. So as we transition a little bit, I want to do more of a roundtable question style here. It's no big secret. If you've turned on a TV, looked at a news app, you know what the news is about these days. Lots of new things going on in less than 90 days of a new presidential administration. So thought one of the fun questions to ask would be if you could describe, if you were going to be president for a day, here we go. If you were going to be president for a day, what executive order would you pass to benefit women professionally?
I had several, but I'll start with this. I call it Women Infrastructure and Innovation Act. I would allocate federal contracts with at least 30% target for women-led firms in energy, infrastructure, and technology. I would launch a national registry of certified women for board appointments, advisory roles, and R&D panels, research and development. I would fund women innovation labs at historically underutilized colleges and universities and community colleges for hands-on leadership in energy and AI, artificial intelligence. Somebody asked me that earlier. I would create a federal public service fellowship for mid-career women to lead large-scale innovation projects. And why? Because inclusion without investment is just optics. And let's put women at the center of building the future and not just watching it happen. So that's what I would do if I was president, among a lot of other things. But yes.
Okay, I didn't know men were going to be here today. So buckle up. I got super excited about this question. I loved it. So I did the outsourcing to multiple group texts of girlfriends of mine. I'm like, I've got to hear what they have to say.
So girls have way too much energy.
I know. I'm cheating, and I have to share some answers with you guys. So
maybe my work has been too serious lately.
Yeah. Gotta outsource. Okay, so I'm gonna go through some of my favorites. Workplace nanny service when kids are sick or school holidays don't align with your work schedule. And dads, I know you guys feel some of these too. Adjust workplace hours to 9 to 2 with flex hours to get to a full 40 or plus hour work week. Affordable, dependable childcare, universal paid maternity leave, transparent pay, equal pay audits, grants for women-owned businesses, healthcare initiatives to make women's healthcare more affordable. This is my absolute favorite one. In Texas, it's illegal to sell puppies before they are 8 weeks old, unless they are sold with their mother. Good start for parental leave, same standard that we have for dogs. Companies, roles, I know. Now, I don't know if it's the same for cats, but that is dogs. And another, this is a friend of mine, she's a recruiter, and she's had to give this speech, I think, multiple times, and she was just kind of like, hey, different companies and different roles might serve you better in different seasons, right? So there's probably a time in your life when the more structured work schedule is not a problem, and then there's probably a time in your life where you need that flexibility. And so that was something that she said she tried to reiterate to candidates when they were looking at jobs is, what's the company culture like, and does it align with this season in your life? Absolutely. And Another friend, this is a group of 30-something women. One woman said, "What the heck is coming down the pipe? What are we going to do when there's menopause, when we have to care for elderly parents?" Things like that we don't really know what we're going to need yet. And then even better paternity leave. And so I think the general theme of all of these group texts when I asked the question was just the need for flexibility when life requires it, right? And so I think sometimes that comes from the company's culture. Sometimes it's just your manager. And so it was just kind of like a resounding theme of flexibility is needed, and especially when something is happening in your life, whether it's kids, caring for elderly parents, maybe you get severely ill, you have a critical illness, right? And so it was just a very fun conversation to have with working women.
I kind of feel like all of those ladies' HR departments probably already know who they are. Like, I felt like it was directed at me a little bit there. But all right, but all lovely responses for both of you ladies. So, Fatima, would you like to chime in?
I think same. Most of my things that I wrote down are similar to what you both said, but also I think it's really important the equal representation of women on leadership roles across both private and public sectors, because I think that's not something that has been really inclusive as of today, and mainly in the infrastructure and energy sector. I will just leave it at that, but I think that's really important and something we should all think about.
And the only one I want to build upon that, and the reason for that is when you look at the wage gaps, when you look at why policies and procedures don't get supported, is because there's not a lot of people at the table making those decisions that have the power to do it. And so, again, back to it's important that women are at the table, or men that understand when we're trying to push something, not to be our friends, but to literally advocate for us to get those things pushed, because it's a lot of work to do that.
Let's shift gears a little bit. So we talked about what you would change, but let's talk a little bit more about challenges now that kind of tie into some of those things that prompted what you would change. So if you could discuss a little bit about some of your biggest challenges when that you faced as a woman in the energy sector, and share with us a little bit about how you overcame some of those challenges, if you would.
Sure. I mean, unlike the two young ladies to my left, how many of you here are first generation? Very few. First generation, the first to graduate from college. All right, so I represent the majority of San Antonio who lives here. And so by that I mean is that I didn't have the support or the background or even knew what Valero was or even what CPS Energy was. So I'm a border baby, two cultures, Mexican and American. And so I was the first of everything. And so when I got into tech, I had no support whatsoever, no mentoring, no how do you build a company, what do you do? But I was also the only brown girl everywhere I went in San Antonio. San Antonio is one of the most segregated cities you'll ever live in. We all stay in our zip codes and our gated communities. You try walking in and being a brown girl into, back then, the Women's Chamber of Commerce, and I was the only brown girl. You walk into the Department of Defense, and I was the only female, plus the only brown girl that was in a room with generals. And so for me, I mean, that was the biggest challenge, being the only one. The only one. You walk into a tech conference, and typically the women are there, handful, but typically they're BD, they're sales, they're behind the table selling a product or a service. Very few are CEOs. 30 years in the industry, I still represent 3% of women in the United States in tech that is a brown girl, that's Hispanic. And you don't have to be brown. My sister's white complected, but my point is being a female, right? So I think navigating rooms to be included in boardrooms and in any room where they look like me is still few in between. I think learning how to turn discomfort into distinction is something that's helped me. Gender biases, I started at 21, so I've experienced it all, sexism, ageism, you name it, it's happened. And I think, again, overcoming tone policies and assumptions is I wish I had it with me, but when I first became part of the new vision for CPS Energy, I don't know if you know this, but in its 80-year history, it hadn't had a female Latina be chairwoman or they hadn't had a woman in 80 years. I think there was only, in the 80 years of it being municipally owned, there had only been 4 women until me that had served as a trustee. So the first news article that came out had me next to a white guy, former Secretary of State, and they had me, and they decided to depict me. I don't know if you know this term, what a chola is, what like a lowrider person looks like. So they put me with big hoops, purple lipstick, and a horrible suit. And anybody who knows me knows I dress really well, and in sandals. And when I talk about biases, I've been at it for a long time. That was still the only thing they can come up with. When I looked at it, my friends called me. They were all laughing because they know I love Salvador Ferragamo shoes. I mean, I'm a big fan of them. And they're like, oh my God, did you see the shoes they portrayed you with? And I was like, I was more upset about the shoes. I expected that bias. And it's interesting because what I saw, you could be really negative about how they portrayed you as a cartoon character, but I was just as tall as he was. So you could look at it and be very upset, and yeah, it bothered me, but it drove me to be better at what I do, right? So I think, again, getting that feedback and focus it into a leadership presence. You walk in, you own the room. I don't apologize for who I am, what I do, and what I bring to the table. When I get asked, what do you bring to the table, Janie? I say, I bring the whole damn table. You want to know anything? I'm over-prepared. I'm never under-prepared. And that is just because of double standards and biases of labeling. You are expected to be 10 times better. And you have to. You got to be prepared. It's like being in planning for a military operation. You got to be ready with situational awareness and be ready because everything's coming at you. And I think the other thing for me that was hard was the lack of access. It wasn't the lack of ambition. It's been the lack of access. When I first started Webhead and I was looking for VC funding, I would see less qualified men getting a check than I would. And I started with $500 in my company and a credit card and free open source software and an internet connection out of my house. And today I outlasted most startup companies in San Antonio. And to this day, my colleague will get a $20 million contract, and I'm lucky to win a $3 million contract with 10 times more standards and expectations that my colleagues have. I think access is really hard. It's not ambition. All of us here are very qualified, but we still live in a world where these challenges still exist, whether you're brown or not, whether you're a minority or not. I mean, I will tell you, one of the biggest privileges in being part of CPS is when you look like the employees, they trust the organization more as a trustee. I walk into a room and one of the biggest privileges is from the janitor to the most high-ranking, not too many Latinas at CPS Energy, but they're grateful you're leading the organization on their behalf. And so it's really important. And so I would just say, reiterate, being the only one in the room, gender biases in leadership, the lack of access have been some of the biggest challenges, but also the biggest opportunities in my life.
Okay, I had to write some of these down just because I was reflecting on early career with this question, and there's these key moments in early career that really stuck out to me that I want to share. So they're kind of like storytelling. So I think I shared early on, I went from an internship role into a pipeline measurement assurance type role. And so I went straight into the field where I was working with people from other companies, other teams, and it was kind of like, who's this young girl telling us what to do and what right does she have? And it wasn't so much of an issue that I was a woman, I was very young. And I was very green in the space, right? And so I found myself having to work extra hard to prove my intelligence, prove that I was capable, prove that I knew what I was talking about, even though my experience was very limited. And I worked extra hard to do that. And so I tried to become an expert at what I was doing. And, eventually I got there where they're like, oh, talk to Hannah, she'll solve it. She knows how to deal with this. And so then I kind of earned the role to be managing projects, managing problems, solving those problems. So that was one that was a little bit tough, just being young and just trying to prove yourself in that early career space. The Then I moved into the strategic planning role, and this was a brand new thing for me where I really was applying a lot of what I learned in my MBA program. And I remember we pulled together kind of a brain trust, if you will, and we were looking at a new opportunity, whether or not it made sense for the business. And I was the only woman in the room. There were 18 men and me. And I was intimidated, but I was like, I've got to prove myself. And I'll never forget, there was a discussion, and this was a topic I didn't know a lot about, but I was trying to learn, and there was an acronym used, and I just said, what does that mean? And the man said, well, let me put this in layman's terms for you. And man, that fueled my fire. I was so mad, and it just made me work, I think, 3 times as hard, because I thought, I've got to prove myself to this group. And I did. And before, I think it was maybe 6 months to 12 months later, he asked me if I would mentor his daughter. And so we came full circle, right? I think I earned his respect. And so that was a very tough situation for me, but I learned a lot in that group. And then I would say another thing that I learned is I needed to find mentors, right? I was in meetings with all men, which is fine. I was not uncomfortable with it, often intimidated, but I needed to find some female mentors. And so that was something that I learned the hard way again. And so I sought out female mentors. That was huge for me, just to have somebody that I could talk to, get some advice from. I have a couple that are Valero employees, but then I also have female mentors outside of the company that I can talk to. So I like having those who understand the culture and the organization, and then I like having my advice that it was not necessarily internal advice. So I kind of hit this point where I realized I have got to have another woman that I can talk to about some of these problems. And so that was a big challenge that now is very, very helpful to me. And then another thing is that imposter syndrome. We've all heard this word, but once you overcome some of that early career challenge, and then you get to a place where you do have a seat at the table. Somebody does want to hear what you have to say. You have this feeling of like, oh man, I'm going to fake it till I make it. But I think what I've realized is nobody knows what they're doing, right? We're all sitting at the table not knowing what we're doing. And so it took me a while to figure that out. Because for the longest time, I felt like I was the only one who didn't know what I was doing. But now I realize none of us know what we're doing. We're all just trying to do the best we can and make the best decisions we can with the information that we have. And so that was a tough one. I had to realize again the hard way. And then now I'm in a place in my life where I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and man, am I feeling the pull of home versus the workplace. And I haven't overcome this challenge yet, but I am living it. And so it is the constant struggle of, my kids are sick, I have a huge meeting, I have a presentation, can my mom come help, can my sister come help? And so it's just this pull that I think many of you in this room feel. And again, I haven't solved it, but I think here I've just had to build a community. And I've had to make it known with my peers. And so I work with a lot of people outside of the company, and I just make it known, like, my priority is my family, and this job comes after that. And so people they know this now, like, hey, Hannah, are you on the way to the daycare? Do I have 5 more minutes before you go to the daycare to get the boys? And so I've tried to create this reputation in a sense of, oh, well, family is first for her. She'll get to it, but just know that she's got her priorities straight. And so that's been a huge one for me. And again, I'm still learning this one. It's been a tough one. And then I think the other thing is not letting the high stress of a high stress or a high responsibility role seep into my life at home, right? I have little ones, and I have found myself a couple times losing my temper or being very short with them because I had a rough day. And so this has been a big challenge that I'm trying to manage now. I'll take any tips that you guys have, but since the topic is challenges, that's one I want to share that, again, I know many of you face these same challenges in your jobs and in your home situation as well. So there's more, but those are my big ones.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on the age thing. I think that for me has been a challenge, and it was the biggest challenge in the beginning of my career. As I told you, I was a law clerk, and I started working while I was still doing law school. I was 18, 19 years old. So I got my first job when I was 20 years old. I was helping the general counsel of a midstream company in Mexico, and I was his right hand. And I had not finished law school, but I had a lot of experience, and I was telling the older and the senior attorneys what to do. And I was a woman, and I was 20 years old, and all of them were like 30, 40 years old. They were looking at me like, what the heck does she know about life? And like more about law, energy law. And she doesn't know a thing about pipelines. Like, this is a really difficult streamline of work. So how I overcame that challenge was that I became best friends with the engineering department. I went to them and I told them, okay, I need to know what this is. And I remember the most funny thing for me was, what's a pig trap? Because if you translate in Spanish, it's cochino. And I was like, what's a cochino? Like, that sounds like something I can eat. And they were like, has nothing to do with that, Fatima. And they explained me what a pig trap was, and they explained me many other things. And nowadays, I have learned both the lingo in Spanish and English for all these specific terms for the industry. And that was really challenging, but that was really, it made me feel so proud of where I was going and who I was approaching to be in the best position ever to overcome this challenge. So that was one of them, age and experience, because no one trusted whatever I had to say because I was too young. And also because I was the only woman at the table as well. All the engineering department was all men, same as all the attorneys, all the BD team, and I was the only woman there. And for them, I was not a woman. For them, I was a girl because I was only 20 years old and I didn't know anything about life. So that was really difficult. And also, it's really stressing at that time of your life because you have this added pressure to constantly prove your capability, your expertise. You're trying to negotiate, you're trying to be strategic, and you gotta push harder for them to listen to what you have to say. And that makes your job impossible every single step of the way. So I really echo what my fellows are sharing here because it has been difficult. And I don't know if you know much about Mexico, but also Mexican society, it's a macho society. And it's also a really posh society, at least the environment where I was moving in. And I was also a brown girl. Like, I would see my other peers at the office. They were these tall, blonde, beautiful women. And I was like, yeah, I don't have green eyes. I'm not blonde, but what the heck? I'm intelligent and I'm my own beautiful woman, you know? But that's also difficult, like navigating that. it's it's not a professional thing, but it's a bias on how you look and your looks and your where are you from, if you're brown, if you're blonde,
class.
social, yeah,
Social class is a
yeah,
big deal.
social classes are really terrible, and I think that's also a big bias, at least in Mexico, which I've struggled a lot with. And now moving to the US, English, definitely. It's another challenge. It's not the biggest one, but it's also sometimes it's difficult. Like, you get lost in translation, of course. And I know I've not only live here in the US, but I've mentioned that I also live in Australia. I did my master's degree there, energy and natural resources law, because I also, when I was in Mexico, I decided, okay, I need more tools. I need people to take me more seriously. So I'll go and do my master's degree so people understand that I have the capabilities, not from a law degree, not from only working 8 years at a company, but I also have a master's. And yeah, I think those have been some of the challenges. I echo the challenges they've shared, and this is part of the journey.
Thank you. I love that about being my own intelligent, beautiful self. That really resonated. And I think a lot of us could probably relate to that in the room. We have a lot of male allies in the room, so some of you may have been shifting a little uneasily in your seat. I hope not. But I do want to extend our appreciation to you guys, because you being here, you're supporters, you're our allies, you're fathers, you probably have wives, mothers, sisters, nieces, what have you in your lives, and you see how intelligent and beautiful and valuable they are. So we appreciate you helping to get us to the table, hearing our voices, being inclusive. We appreciate you being here with us. It's a big statement to us, and it makes us feel good as individuals in the same space with you. So we appreciate you for doing that. I know we are a little bit at time, but I want to just real quick pop around and say any last minute advice for the audience that you'd like to share?
Sure. I would say don't wait to be invited into the room. Walk in like you belong. Know your business, know your values, speak from both results and conviction. People will doubt your presence, but they can never ignore your impact. And most importantly, credibility opens doors, but consistency keeps you in the room.
And I shared one already, but find a mentor. If you don't have one, find one. They're very helpful. And then I think the other is, when opportunities come and they seem really scary, do it. Take them, seize them, and it's not luck. They came to you for a reason.
I would say speak up for yourself, advocate for yourself. Same as you do it every day for your company, do it for yourself. No one else is gonna do it for you, so you gotta do it for your own. Take space and stay focused on your goals.
What is the secret to daily perseverance?
A lot of alcohol. No, just kidding. Scotch at night. Grace. I think at the end of the day, something with age. I'm more distinguished than my panelists. I would say grace is the key, in my opinion, to maintaining what you're trying to accomplish, because women are very hard on each other, on themselves, because you heard us say more than once, we had to work harder, we had to be more prepared. That can be very mentally exhausting on top of all the other responsibilities you have. So I think giving yourself grace and saying, hey, today I didn't get to do 100 things, I only did 99. I'm okay. Because it is true. I mean, compared to, again, my male colleagues, they're worried about 3 things and I'm working on 10 things. So I would say give yourself grace.
So if anybody is in the trading world right now, you're dealing with a lot of craziness at the moment. And so I have found that in a very stressful period, I'm a far better person if I will wake up early and get a workout in. I know this sounds kind of ridiculous, but if I will do that, I am happier. I react to problems when I walk in the door much more maturely. My emotions are more under control. And so this is kind of like a tangible, like, here is something that I do every day to handle challenges better, to persevere, to be more motivated, to feel more optimistic. That's wake up a little bit earlier and get that workout in. I'm a better person when I do it.
Be kind to yourself. And being kind to yourself, I think it's sleep 8 hours if you can do it. I know a lot of people can't, and I'm like a koala. I sleep 8 hours. Otherwise, I always tell my peers I come up to the office and I'm an angry person. So I try to be kind with myself, like get a workout, sleep, eat healthy. That helps me manage problems from day to day.
We definitely want you to get your sleep. We don't want an employee attorney. So I want to thank you, ladies, for sharing your stories with us. You're all phenomenal. I appreciate everyone here in the audience. I do want to turn it back over to Michael. We've got some fun giveaways, so hang out for the raffle and some other announcements that Michael has. But thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.